Welcome everyone. I'm Stacy Spriggs. I'm the Community Gardens Program Coordinator and also the School Gardens Program Coordinator for IFAS Extension Sarasota County. And today is the Community Gardens Member Orientation class. So thank you all for attending. And an overview of what we're doing today, the agenda. At the beginning, I'm just doing a program overview for the first 30 minutes. And then the next presentation, Master Gardener Elaine Party, will talk about gardening basics in our area, and followed by Carol Wyatt Evans talking about fertilizers, pesticides, and natural enemies. And in between each of the speakers, we'll have a short break. So if you need to use the restroom, the facilities are right outside the door there, or you can wait for those breaks if you wish. And just a note, we are videotaping this presentation for prosperity. So we will make this available online eventually for community garden members to be able to watch in that way instead of attending the class. And just a quick disclaimer, because we are making a video that will be available online, the materials that we're covering today are intended for use by Sarasota County residents and people who are registered for the Community Gardens program, and probably not applicable, not all the information for folks that are outside of our area. So if anyone has navigated to our website from other areas of the country, our gardening basics information might be very different from what you would experience up north and in other locations. And our community garden program rules would be very different, likely, from what you would have locally as well. So if you have questions in other areas, please contact your local extension office. And because we're making a video, I'll ask that you hold your questions if you can until the end of the presentation. So getting into it, why are we here? I always like to think about why we're here using our valuable time to attend the class. Our Community Gardens program was created in 2011. My position was created with the county because there was a lot of interest in creating new community gardens and new school gardens. So there was a need for having consistent operating procedures. So my position was created to help address that. And within our community garden program, we would like for everyone to feel like they're part of something larger, that it's not just one person in one plot, that we are a community of gardens. And we have 214 plots in the program currently, which represents about 350 people. So you're not out there alone doing your gardening efforts, you're a part of something larger. And we hopefully would be all working together to make the program successful. It is a basic introduction today to how the program operates, both for current members and for new members. And people who are moving here from out of the state will certainly benefit from learning more about growing vegetables locally. So some of the benefits of gardening. Why do we do this? Socially, community gardens are wonderful for getting out there and meeting your neighbors. You can meet people who are like-minded, who share a similar interest to yours. So it's a great way to meet people in your local area. And friendships are formed when you're out there shoveling next to somebody in the next plot, planting and talking about what you're growing together. It's a really interesting way to make new friends. Physically, anyone who has been out working in 90-degree weather in Florida, moving mulch around, moving soil around, bending, lifting, all those things are great ways to burn calories. The economic benefits of gardening, especially growing your own vegetables. I always think back to when I was in college. On my income at that time, I walked into a grocery store and there were 3 oranges there, 3 organic oranges for $6, and I couldn't afford it. You know, I couldn't afford those kinds of prices. So growing your own food can be much more economic. Fortunately, I got a house a little bit later on, and I had 2 orange trees and a lemon tree and a grapefruit tree, and I learned that growing my own food could be more economic than buying it at the store. And we could expand that to think about areas or our local food system in general. So if we're growing our own local food, then that means that it's not being transported in from South America or California So there are reductions in transportation costs there. Therapeutic, there's a whole field of horticultural therapy, which I'm not certified in, but I would encourage you to look it up if you're interested. But what I can tell you about horticultural therapy is that when I'm out planting with students at school gardens, and there is sheer joy in them planting those seeds and watching those plants grow into this beautiful plant that is producing fruits and vegetables that in turn sustain us when we eat them. So it's a really wonderful process. And I have people tell me all the time how nice it is to plant something in the ground and watch it grow, that you're giving life to something and it's giving back to you. So, educational benefits. There's always something more to learn about gardening. You're all in this room today because there's always something more to learn about gardening. I've only been doing this for 5 years, and I can tell you that every day that goes by, I'm learning something new about gardening. And people have been doing this for a lifetime and are still learning more about gardening. So whether it's a new pest management method or a new way to plant or a new way to cover your plot, if you're learning about hornworms that you haven't had to deal with before, or learning about a new variety of seed that you haven't grown before, there's always something more to learn. So it's keeping our minds active, and we're all benefiting from that. For nutrition, suffice it to say that it's always, if we're out there growing our own food, then hopefully we're having some diet improvements as well. We're eating that fresh, healthy produce that's coming right out of the ground. Some of the locations that we see community gardens nationwide. Churches are one of my favorite examples. There are lots of churches that have community gardens. So the church members are out there growing food, and the food either goes to a food bank, to a charity, or to other members of the congregation who have fallen on hard times. There are hospitals doing community gardens around the country, lots of colleges and schools. Here in Sarasota County currently, at the time of this presentation, there are 60 school gardens, and that represents hundreds and hundreds of students that are exposed to gardening and increasing their agricultural knowledge every semester here locally. And this coming semester, we're actually working with a college to be planting a school garden there as well. And of course, in the picture here, a government building. I wasn't able to walk across the White House lawn and get a really good picture of the People's Garden located there currently. But it's over here. You can barely see there's some raised beds over there. And food from the People's Garden actually goes into the White House kitchen and is used there. Now here locally in Sarasota, we have all of our community gardens located at either city or county parks that are participating in Extension's program. We tend to think of community gardens and school gardens for that matter as a new phenomena, but it's not. Community gardens have been around in Europe for centuries. And if we think back to the beginnings of agriculture and farming in general, community gardens have really been around since the beginning of that. So here in America, Detroit claims to have the oldest community gardens, which were potato patches back in 1890. Moving forward just a little bit, World War I, Liberty Gardens were created at that time due to shortages with the food supply. And also during that time period, the government was making large-scale efforts to implement agricultural knowledge in the public school system. Lots of students were out there growing food to supplement that food supply shortage. Rationing reared its ugly head again in the 1940s, World War II, and at that point in time they were called Victory Gardens. And still today, we hear a lot of people calling community gardens Victory Gardens, but the terminology actually came about in World War II. And at that time, gardens were producing 40% of all the vegetables consumed nationally. So that's really a huge number. Of all of the produce eaten in America at that time, 40% was grown in gardens. And the wars ended, and so did the gardens. Most of those gardens vanished at the time the World War II ended. There are still a few around. If you Google Victory Gardens, you can find a few smattering of them here and there across America that are still in production. So drilling down further here locally in Sarasota County, the current community garden trend began in the mid-1990s. Master gardeners created Orange Blossom Community Garden downtown, which is still there today. And just a couple years later, Bayou Oaks was created nearby, up near the airport. And jumping ahead just a few years, around 1995, Extension Director Mike Holsinger at the time worked with Parks Director John McCarthy at the time to select Laurel and Nokomis community garden sites because they recognized that there was a need to serve South County residents as well. Then there was about a 10-year hiatus with no new gardens happening, and all of a sudden there was a flurry of activity. So in 2011, Northport Community Garden was created at Warmonal Springs, and Inglewood Community Garden was created just a few months after that at Buchan Airport Park. So these were efforts of volunteers. They were very much grassroots on the ground, getting people to sign up for them, finding the supplies that they needed. There were neighborhood grants involved, and the need for some consistent operating procedures became more apparent at this point. So my position was created. Around that same time, Culver House Community Garden was also underway, and that one's located in Palmer Ranch off McIntosh Road. This is the largest garden in the county, having 69 plots currently. And following that was the most recent addition, I should say, at Bee Ridge Park. So within that 3-year time span between 2011 and 2013, we had 4 new gardens created. So there was a lot happening then. So just a quick summary of the order that they were created in, chronologically. And that brings me up to current time frame. I brought a copy of this with me, the Community Gardens Program Handbook, which has a summary of all of our rules and requirements. So anyone watching this video who is in the Community Gardens program should take a read through this and become more familiar with all of the roles and responsibilities and requirements of the program. So in short, our program, the Gardens program, builds communities around food, improving access to healthy produce for both residents and students while raising agricultural awareness. My role at Extension, throughout the year it varies depending on what's happening. During the summer, I'm engaged with the annual plot renewal process. Members pay a low fee to participate in the program, so I collect their registration forms and their fees. When members are not complying with rules of the program, then I do enforcement actions and terminations at times. Wait list management. Most of the gardens have wait lists to join, and they are allowed to join on a first come, first served basis. Administrative and budgetary oversight. So when people are paying those program fees, They go to support things like fence repairs and shed repairs and everything from wheelbarrows to new sheds. So we look at the budget each year. I do site inspections with garden managers twice a year, and we determine at that point what we're going to buy throughout the year. We coordinate with park staff and other agencies that are involved occasionally. Parks is basically the landlords for the program. So I work with them on a frequent basis on various issues. And I provide consistency with the other gardens throughout the county, which is important because we want to make sure that we're doing things the same way at Northport that we are at Culver House, and there's a carryover between the programs. We apply for grants occasionally as needed. And most important there on the bottom is that because this is a program associated with UF IFAS Extension, we have access to UF research and workshops. So anytime someone has a question about a bug that they're encountering or a disease, then they should feel free to contact us with those questions so we can help get them addressed. And I'll also point out that the plant clinic is available to members. Master gardeners staff the plant clinic throughout the county at various locations, and they can be reached anytime at 941-861-9807. Moving on to other roles in the garden. The garden manager, there's one or more at each site, and they assist new members who are just joining the program with getting acclimated to the new environment there. They assist me during the plot renewal process, when plots are abandoned, when people aren't coming back, and when things are not being maintained appropriately. They communicate with me about those things. They coordinate with me on expenses. So they're present when I do my inspections a couple times a year, and we talk about what repairs are needed, what supplies are needed. They help with organizing work days. And then the garden member, of course, complies with the membership rules. And I'll go over these briefly on the next slide. But in our membership agreement, there's a list of rules that everyone is required to comply with. So that's their responsibility, and I make sure they're complying. Of course, they register and pay the fee to participate. And most important, they maintain common areas. So not just maintaining their own individual plots, but also the surrounding pathways, areas around sheds, fence lines, so that the garden is kept up by everyone. It's a shared responsibility and not just the responsibility of the garden manager. And again, all the rules are covered in the membership agreement, but these are the top 10 that we sort of have issues with occasionally, so I'll cover those quickly. Number one, the primary thing that we have problems with is maintenance. So weeds getting out of control, getting into other people's plots, into the pathways. In summertime in Florida, weeds can become overgrown very quickly. So number one rule is to keep your space maintained. Number two there is if you're going to be out of town for an extended period of time, if you're a seasonal resident, this applies to you. You are required to either cover your plot with a tarp or heavy mulch if you're going to be away for a long period of time. Otherwise, you would need to designate a secondary member to take care of your plot for you while you're away. And you are required to participate in work days. There's 16 hours per year is a requirement. So if you're not able to participate in a scheduled work day, then you should work with your garden manager to find another activity where you can complete that time. So if weeding is not something that you're able to do for medical reasons or whatever, then there are other tasks that need to be handled. You might help with keeping the shed clean. You might help with a carpentry project, with repairing a bed frame. There are lots of different things that need to happen to keep that garden running smoothly. So please do talk with your garden manager to find out how you can help to get those 16 hours accomplished. And it seems like common sense, but it has happened. Don't remove vegetables or impact other people's plots. If you're not growing it, then you're not supposed to be picking it. And there are some gardens that have some common areas, trees and whatnot, where people can harvest from those collectively. But if it's in someone else's plot, make sure you have permission before you pick it and take it home. Even if they have an incredible bumper crop of green beans and you know they're never going to be able to use them all, you still need to ask permission before you take it. Be nice to each other. Should be common sense again, right? But we certainly have had issues with people not being nice to each other. So it is a rule. No belligerent behavior is allowed in the gardens. Be safe. Keep your phone with you at all times. And make sure you lock up before you leave. We're gardening in Florida, and there are snakes, there are bees. We're in public parks. There might be other park patrons there who, are sketchy characters. So your best defense mechanism is to have that cell phone with you so you can call 911 if you need to. And locking up before you leave, we certainly don't want to invite people who are not supposed to be in the garden to come there when they're not allowed to be there. Attend a power tools training class. If you are operating a weed eater, a tiller, a chipper, shredder, power drill, any of those mechanisms that require power that are not hand operated, those are things that you need to attend a power tools training class to be allowed to do. Otherwise, you're not allowed to operate that equipment on county property. And if you need information about when a class will be scheduled or how to get that accomplished, please contact me. The county is not liable for injuries. Everyone is gardening at their own risk. There's a liability release statement in the membership agreement. So if you're injured, contact your own private medical care. Garden organically. One of our next speakers will get into this more. But we have an actual list of products that's approved to use in the garden and a list of products that's not approved to use in the garden. Not everything is safe to use around edibles. So we have an actual approved integrated pest management plan that we have to follow. And if you have any concerns, contact Extension staff or the garden manager. And last slide here, I just want to point out a few of these supporting documents. I mentioned the program handbook before, which gives an inclusive view of all of the program rules and requirements. So if you haven't read that, please do so. And contact me if you need a copy. A link to all these documents is available at our website. Our membership agreement that contains all the rules and requirements that everyone should be familiar with because you signed this form at the time of registering for the program. We have a volunteer opportunity description that covers the responsibilities of the community garden managers. So that's available online as well. And if there are external volunteers who want to come into the garden to help out for a day, who are there to help with a special project, or if you're one of those seasonal folks, you're going to be away for a while and you need somebody to come and help you in, we do have a form that needs to be signed by any external volunteers. Twice a year I mentioned that we do the walkthroughs and inspections at the garden, so there's a checklist of things that we're looking for. And it's things like safety hazards, tripping hazards. So that's available for you to review as well. Our integrated pest management plan that I mentioned a minute ago. And hurricane preparedness checklist. This is something that in Florida is important to stay on top of. If you're going to be gone for the entire summer for 4 months, then this is something that you should look at before you leave for the season, so you can take those actions that are applicable to you. And of course, if you're staying in town, if a storm is approaching our area, then I send out an email a few days ahead of time to let people know they need to take some actions. There's a grievance form. We would like to think that everything happens perfectly within the program and everybody's happy at all times. But in those cases, when that's not possible, there is a formal grievance process in place to handle those situations. And the Vegetable Gardening Guide is an IFAS publication, which our next speaker will cover more thoroughly as well. But it is a great document to give you an overview of gardening in Florida, and it's very concise. So if you're looking for that online, you can search for IFAS Publications, and it's called Florida Vegetable Gardening Guide. And the last thing that I'll mention is our class catalog. We have a new class catalog every 6 months at the time of this recording, and it lists all the various classes that Extension offers. We have everything from rain barrels to composting, and just a wealth of different topics that are all related to gardening. So please be sure to check out other classes that you can learn from. And one other book that I'll mention before I'm done here is Vegetable Gardening in Florida by James Stevens. It's great to pick up a copy of this and read through it as well. Lots of good information.